You are listening to the Merchant Meetings podcast. Join us as we share the insights, successes, and failures that we and others have experienced in the small business space. So if you listened to the last podcast, you would have heard us touch on the healthy meal prep business that we owned. And out of all of the businesses and ventures we've been a part of, that has to be the hardest business, not just to grow, but just to run every single day. I mean, if you guys listened to the last podcast, you would know we were in the fitness industry, we were in supplements, but we weren't in food.
No.
So we were diving into something that we had no idea about. So hats off to anyone that's in the food industry. It is hard.
Yeah, respect. It's not an easy game.
Oh my goodness. But that's the story we're going to dive into today, how we started our healthy meal prep business. Did you want to explain how we came across the opportunity?
Yeah, so one of the good things about being in business is you meet other people in business. And so the gym that T was working at the time had a few PTs there. And one of those PTs who was referring clients down to us decided to start a meal prep business from their house. And he did really well. Like, he had some awesome recipes. He developed a clientele, and it was doing like very well for a home-based business. And we started referring clients to him because we were eating the meals ourselves. And so we knew the food was good, and we were happy to refer like clients onto him. And so when we started referring quite a few people, because we're at a retail store in the fitness industry, it was quite easy for us to do that, especially because I was doing nutrition plans. It became a large portion of his business. And so eventually, when he had a family situation that he needed to attend to, which was back in Egypt, there was another business that his family were involved in, and he needed to go back and see to that business because it was a much larger business. It meant that he wasn't going to be able to continue on the meal prep business. And so we became the most likely candidates to take it on because we had referred so many people. So we were already in close proximity to that clientele. And that sounds good on paper, but moving into a food business when you don't have an idea of how food businesses run, that was a challenge that I don't think we really knew what we were taking on.
Yeah, 100%. So when Martin moved over to Egypt, before that, he spent 2 weeks with us. So we said, yep, we'll take on the healthy meal prep business. Steve and I jumped on Google. We searched out commercial kitchen or kitchen for hire. And luckily we found one within like a 10-kilometer radius of our supplement store and where Martin lived. And then we're like, okay, cool. We need another worker because there's no way that I'm going to be a full-time chef doing this business. So we had a family member that did her like food and chef qualifications. So we said, hey, come and work for us. And she agreed to it, which is amazing. And Martin spent 2 weeks with us in this commercial kitchen that we hired out just down the road from the supplement store. So everything was falling together perfectly.
Quite well at that time, yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to explain how the commercial kitchen like worked with the timeshare thing?
Yeah, so as a business grows, the processes need to grow with it. And so Martin was excellent in the processes that he had used inside a home-based business. So from memory, I think he might have been doing around 300 or 400 meals, which is really significant for a home-based business. And because you're able to keep overheads low, I think from memory, he was making something like about $2,000 a week from a home-based business. And at the time, that was quite amazing. But as soon as you go into a commercial kitchen, all the overheads increase, which means you need to make more meals just to cover overheads if you want to be profitable. And so I think it was about 300 to 400 meals, which was the break-even point for us. And so the processes that he had in place to facilitate 400 meals going out a week were not the same processes that we would need in order to do much greater numbers than that. And so we learnt how to run the meal prep business based on the processes he showed us. And that was great because that's all he had to show us, and that was how he was running the business successfully at that time. So we couldn't receive anything else from him. And I think the most challenging thing is learning processes on the run because you have deadlines in the food space. You've got the deadline of when food is going to expire. You've got the deadline of when one particular meal is going to finish and the other needs to like jump in its place in order to get them out before the end of the week. You have deadlines where bacteria can start growing on food if it's not stored correctly. You've got the deadline of needing to get these meals out to a customer within the time frame that you've said that you would. and you've got the time frame of, being able to rock up to the kitchen with employees and work in a time frame that actually makes sense, that someone is willing to do. And so all of this needs to fit together. You need to receive stock from the suppliers, and that needs to happen in the right time frame so you can start cooking. And all of this came together as quite a challenge, because we weren't ready for putting processes in place that had deadlines of, just multiple sort of components. And so learning on the fly once you have the pressure of deadlines is a lot different to learning it in theory and then going in and starting a business, with the correct procedures in place. And so that was a huge challenge, and we didn't have anyone else in the food space that we knew. We no family, friend members. We literally kind of learned, because when something hurt, you got punched in the face, you'd learn pretty quick and you need to adapt to it. And what it kind of ended up resulting in is just very long hours, because if you did something wrong, you would then need to correct it to fall, it's still inside the deadline that you promised to customers.
Yeah. So in the 2 weeks that Martin was teaching us on the fly with deadlines and his current customers, I would say myself and Maria picked up all the processes pretty quickly. But one thing is, when Martin left, obviously we had the overheads of a full-time employee, Maria, and the timeshare space at the commercial kitchen. So we obviously had to increase the prices of the meals from what Martin was selling them at. I think he was selling them at like maybe $4 or $5.
Something like that, yeah.
And then we raised our prices only $1. Like, imagine now getting a meal for $6. That's crazy.
Yeah, like 200 grams of protein, 200 grams of a carbohydrate source, fully packaged, fully delivered to you.
And out of his 15 customers that we took on that was facilitating the 300 meals, majority of them dropped off.
Yeah, maybe there was like 30 customers, but I think 15 sort of stayed on. So about half the business dropped off as soon as we increased the price. And that's a really important lesson to learn in business. You need to understand what are the metrics for that business, or the components to that business that are causing it to succeed. Because if you change the dynamics of the business, you may lose the competitive advantage, or the competitive advantage that is resonating with that particular part of the customer base. So you change the price to price sensitive customers, and you won't have those customers. And so you need to pick up a different market, or additional customers, replace them in order for the business to then, become profitable or even break even.
And we were super lucky that we had the supplement store that had been running for 3 years, I think, at this time.
I think maybe less, maybe two and a half.
Oh,
yeah,
possibly. So you had already built up
fresh.
a really good customer base.
Yeah, we definitely had like decent walkthrough. Yeah.
Yeah. So something that we did back then, obviously we jumped on Facebook and Instagram, but it wasn't big to promote the meals. I jumped on Canva back in its early days and made up a flyer with all of the different recipes, all the prices, took photos of the meals, and gave them to Steve to hand out to all the customers that came in. Luckily, my old job, which was the gym I worked at, also said, yeah, like we'll hand out flyers so we can sell your meals. And that was great. So even though quite a few of the original customers dropped off, we gained so many in the first year that it made up for everyone that dropped off.
Yeah.
And then I guess the next point is, once we started increasing our meals, we needed more time in the kitchen, because we were doing a timeshare thing in the kitchen, which is where we would rent out half of this commercial kitchen for 4 or 5 hours a day, 4 days a week. And it got to the point where we were thinking, hey, we need to hire out this whole kitchen. We need to just take on the lease, because there were other people running their cooking businesses in there with us, but we had just outgrown the space. So we approached the owner and we said, hey, we want to take on the lease. Our business is growing. Unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to stay here if we weren't able to take all of the time hiring spaces out.
Yeah, so their business model was to subcontract the space, and obviously the more time that was subcontracted out, the more money they would make. And so it was in their interest to maximize the amount of time that it was being rented out for. But there were 2 other businesses, at least, that I remember operating in that space. I think one was, there was a business where they were making meals for preschool kids. Preschool or preschool.
Preschool kids.
And they would, drop off these little healthy meals to the preschools. And so that was in the middle of the day, because they were prepping them fresh for the kids, that are in preschool. And then the other one was a later time share slot, which was an Indian takeaway business. And I think they were just mostly doing butter chicken. And they, of course, and they would just literally, facilitating online orders. So they were close to the public. It's what you call a dark kitchen. And a lot of, you'll see that on Uber apps. You'll come across businesses that you're like, this is saying it's in Penrith and I've never seen this business before. It's because another business is just using it as a dark kitchen and offering it, only via an online space. And that's essentially what we were doing as well. We were running an online business from a physical location, but all of the foot traffic had to come from online or our retail stores or referrals. But the main part of the business was driving online sales. But anyway, aside from that, we had those 2 extra businesses that were in there, and the kindergarten or the preschool business, they were cool, like they were easy to work around, but we needed the space. The other mob that were in there, oh my goodness. So I think that was probably the thing that got me the most angry, and it sort of initiated the conversation with the people that were subcontracting the space out. And we essentially came to them and said, if you don't give us the whole kitchen, then we're gone. And we were, 70% of their business at the time. And so they were like, yeah, that makes sense. You can have the whole thing. And eventually they ended up just giving us the lease. Because I think they probably didn't realize that there wasn't going to be much profit in subcontracting a commercial kitchen in the middle of Seven Hills. Like, this is not like, a premium location in Sydney where you have a huge customer base right at your doorstep.
Yep. And at this point, so when we first started the business, it was around 300 mils, and then it dropped down to like 200, 150. And then at this point, when we took over the entire lease of the kitchen, it shot up to, I think, 1,600 mils, maybe 1,700 mils. It shot up really quickly.
Yeah, it probably took 3 or 4 months to, I think, hit to maybe 1,000 mils. But that was off the back of a lot of marketing now. Like, we were really looking at organic marketing because we didn't have a paid budget to apply to it. But yeah, I remember when we hit that 1,000 mil mark and we were like, this is ridiculous.
To put it into perspective, at the time that we were even getting 1,000 mils, we didn't have a website, which means people had to DM the Facebook or Instagram page and just text me their order. And we were kind of running off like a trust honest system. Obviously, they couldn't pay me over DM or message or anything. So they would send in their meals and I would cook them, and I would just trust that they would pay me on delivery or pickup, which I'm pretty sure 99% of them did. And if they didn't, they would leave like a deposit with Steven's store when they picked up their meals.
Yeah, I don't think we actually had anyone that like didn't pay us, which was pretty amazing.
I don't recommend anyone do that now.
No.
But that was something that was truly amazing. So if any old customers of Mighty Macro Meals are listening to this, thank you for paying. And it got to the stage where I was spending half a day calculating orders just off messages and DMs. And I'm thinking, if we're going to grow this even more, we need a website and we need a structured spreadsheet that we can put everyone's orders in that spits out exactly how much beef we need to cook, how much chicken. So we know the true cost of our goods as well, because we're growing at a rapid rate.
Mm. And I think that probably speaks to what the landscape of the meal prepping space looked like at the time. The fact that we thought we could operate that business without a website is because it was so new. And I think that's an important thing to realize. Like, are you a part of an emerging market or are you a part of an established market? If you're a part of an established market, you need to make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row. You need to make sure that you're resonating with the market in a way that you're not going to seem unprofessional, that you're going to seem like you're a real player, you're going to install trust and confidence in the market. When you're in an emerging market, you can do things that are a lot more relaxed and people are relatively accepting of it because they haven't got preconceived ideas about what that product or service should look like. And so I think that was probably why we were able to run a business in that way and still be successful, is because people didn't have preconceived ideas about what it should look like. Like, to put it into perspective, the only meal prep business that I knew of at that time by name was My Muscle Meals. I don't think My Muscle Chef had really developed yet. And if you look at the market now, you've got, Food for Fitness, U Foods, My Muscle Chef. I don't know if My Muscle Meals is still around. Papa Macros is big in the Western Sydney space. There are a lot of big players in the meal prep business, and it's really competitive. And we weren't really competing inside that market. And so knowing what market you're going into and how you need to operate in that market effectively and how you're going to be perceived by the market is really important. So if you're jumping on the start of a trend, yeah, there's going to be things that you can do that you can't do inside an established market.
100%. And I mean, we didn't jump on this business opportunity because we saw the healthy meal prep business booming. We just thought, oh, this will be like a cool extra income that I can do instead of working at the gym. And we've already got the customer base at the supplement store and we can sell inside the supplement store. So this makes sense. But it just happened to be the time that we took it on, the healthy meal prep market was starting to boom.
Yeah, and I think exactly. We weren't like projecting market growth to be the driver of this business. We were just saying, we were thinking, we can see how we can grow this particular business working from a retail store in addition to having a website and having all the relationships with the gyms that we did, because we were taste testing at gyms regularly. And so we were literally bringing down supplements from Zion Nutrition at the time and meals from Mighty Macro Meals. And there was no increased cost of us doing a taste test. And in fact, they were like just super grateful that we would be giving a free meal out at the taste test because people weren't doing that yet. And so, yeah, it's funny what you can do when you've got a platform and you can sort of horizontally integrate. You can go into other markets that would still resonate with your main customer base. And I think that's part of the parcel as to why it worked quite quickly for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, up to 1,000 meals quite quickly from 300 or 400. And remember, like once you've broken even in business, all the additional meals after that, that's when you're actually seeing sort of the fruits of your labor. And so we were making, I think, about $6 per meal. And so, you go and do 600 meals over your break even, and all of a sudden you've got a business that's, sort of clearing 120, 130,000 after expenses. And then we eventually ended up moving to 2000, 2002, 2004.
At our peak, our biggest week, which I was celebrating, but then also had like a nervous breakdown because I had to do all the work, was 2,600 meals was our biggest week.
And I mean, that's not big compared to the meal prep companies they're at now, but for, essentially a 4-person business, I think at that size, three and a couple of delivery drivers that started in the manner that we started in, I think it was pretty impressive. I think that was probably one of the first times that we had income coming at a fast rate that we shouldn't had it projected for. I think from memory, there were some weeks where we cleared over 10 grand profit, but it was like 6, 7, 8 grand profit a week. And we had never been exposed to sort of that money before because we had one retail store. And as you guys heard from the last episode, that took a little while to grow, but this business grew relatively fast. And the profit that was associated with it was pretty substantial for us.
So you're probably listening to that and thinking, oh, wow, 10 grand. Like these guys are rolling in it. I was doing the job of like 3 full-timers.
Yeah.
I had no life for 3 years.
Being underpaid.
100%. Obviously jumping in from just working at a gym. Now I'm a chef. I'm a full-time chef. I'm a delivery driver, head of operations, if you want to call it, and everything else in between. I would spend majority of my hours over a stove cooking like hundreds of kilos of meat and chicken that I guess I didn't really have a perception of how much money we were bringing in because I'm like, I never leave this kitchen.
And so I was sort of hoping that when I got married to T later on, because we weren't married at that time, that, all these skills that were learned in the kitchen would translate to good meals being cooked at home. But that didn't end up eventuating. She ended up hating cooking and the opposite happened. So that wasn't really a plan that went the way I thought it was going to.
I still have all the recipes. But anyways, so again, everyone listening is probably thinking, wow, you guys grew it to X amount of meals. You're bringing in profit. Like you've got 2 other workers. Yeah, T's working like the same hours as 2 full-timers. But like this is pretty good. Until we took over the entire lease of the property, we didn't realize how many problems would arise taking over a commercial space. Did you want to tell them just a few of the problems that came up when we took over the entire commercial kitchen?
Yeah, so if you're a young business person and you did what I used to do, okay, they're making $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a week. You times that by 52 weeks in a year, they're making $300,000-$400,000. Yeah, that's not the way that it works. What happens is you make $6,000 and then something breaks and you lose $5,000 the next week. So it's not just a linear trajectory of growth. So I remember one week, and this was probably the first time in business where I experienced like large costs, because in a retail store, you don't have things that break. What are you going to like drop a tub of protein? It's going to cost you $40. It's like not a big deal. When a freezer breaks in the kitchen, or when 2 freezers break in the same week, and then a cooler room goes, we were 12, 13, 14, I think even potentially towards the $15,000 mark out of pocket that week. So it can wipe 3 or 4 weeks of profit that you've put aside. And remember, you're paying tax on those dollars too. So it's not 7,000 clear. It's 7,000 minus whatever GST that's, going to be charged, and then the applicable tax brackets. And so you've got that, and then something like that happens. You're not just simply like stacking cash. Like there's things that go wrong in business, and you need that sort of float in a business to keep you in business. Like you can't go spend that money. And I think that's where a lot of young business guys go wrong. They make money, bring it out into their personal life and spend it. But businesses need floats to like weather the storm, weather seasonal patterns. And when things go wrong, that it needs to be able to pay for, the bills that get associated with those, mishaps, so it can keep working. And so I think, from memory, it was somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 that went out in the 1 week. And that was the first time we'd experienced large sort of costs to a business, which was demoralizing. Like the amount of work that was going into that business to have it simply wiped out because a freezer broke. You're like, this is not fair. And so some of the times where you made really good money, you weren't feeling elated. You weren't being like, this is insane. How are we making this much money? You were thinking, well, that just covered the cost of the broken freezer. Now maybe the work from the last 5 weeks actually feels like it's going towards something. It finally feels like we're making some progress here. So making money in business, especially when it's a labor intensive or a mechanically based business where things go wrong and costs can just get blown out of proportion, it doesn't feel like you think it would feel, even if you're putting runs on the board.
Yeah. And at this point, it's not like we were trying to like scale the business for where we wanted to go. Like it's not like we wanted to grow the business and move out into a whole built out kitchen with like X amount of cool rooms and all these employees. We were just kind of, I guess you could say we were kind of not chasing our tail, but almost chasing our tail. We had to implement different processes because each week our meals were growing. We had to find another employee. We had to add another freezer. We needed more equipment. It was crazy.
And it's because we came into it ignorantly. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have a process. We didn't have people to reach out to that could have like pointed us in a better direction. So that's why we were chasing our tail. If we actually had a better plan and we had the right amount of capital and the right amount of processes all before we moved in, who knows what that business could have done. And I think that's, something you really want to take into account before you go into business. Make sure that you've understood what the business takes to run in its current capacity and what you're going to need for growth, because you need to essentially plan and act. Let me rephrase that. You need to facilitate the business, or you need to plan inside the business for where you're going, not where you are. And what that means in a practical level is that you need to be reinvesting money into additional employees, into more, in this case, more freezer space, more cooler room space, more like product on hand for the potential of making more money. So as I said, when you're making 6, 7, 8, 9 grand a week, and then you have something go wrong, but you're also trying to reinvest into the business for the growth that it likely, is going to have, you're not taking out cash on a weekly basis and buying Louis V belts. You're literally, planning for where you want to go, because that's an expensive process. Scaling a business is expensive. It's reinvesting money into it for the chance of potential future and the potential of future profits.
And just to add on to the story, did you want to tell them about the unexpected bill that we copped when we took over the commercial kitchen as well?
Yeah, so I mean, like in relation to like what it costs for the freezers, it wasn't a massive thing. But when we were doing the timeshare thing in the kitchen, the electricity bill was included in our cost. And when we asked like the people that were subcontracting to us, what do we need to put aside for electricity here? We've never run a kitchen before. And they're like, $200 a week, that should be sweet. That's like what kind of we pay. And the only reason that that's what they were paying is because they never had an actual meter read on the electricity meter. And so when we took it over, the electricity company tried to hit us with something like a $9,000, $10,000, $11,000 bill. And we were like, yo, that's not ours. And like, we've just taken over this. And like, okay, we'll go chase up the previous owners. But what that meant is we didn't know now what we needed to forecast in the future, because clearly $200 wasn't going to cut it. So when the first electricity bill came in at $3,500, this was just an expense we hadn't forecasted for. And so again, it's like a punch in the face. Like you go turn over $14,000, maybe you're netting $5,000, you go receive a $3,500 bill that week. You're like, what the hell? Like, what are we doing this for? And so a lot of the time it really just seemed like we were pushing crap uphill when it was falling back on us. And so yeah, it was a hard business. There was just so many punches that you took to the face, and it often seemed like, I don't know how, like this, seems like, I don't know how or why we should be continuing this.
There was a lot of times I was cooking over the stovetop and I had like 5 different pans going at once and I was just crying.
Yeah, it was a hard business. And I don't think a lot of the time you told me that sort of stuff, I would have given the sympathy just for, on the record.
Yeah, 100%. And then at the same time, we were trying to continue to grow the business because we didn't know what we wanted to do with it. So we said, how about we just continue to roll with it, grow into it as the orders come in. So at this stage, I had myself and Maria full-timers, and then we brought on another full-timer, which was Maria's sister. They both have amazing work ethic, and they stayed with me from when I hired them up until we exited the business. And still their work ethic is amazing. I wouldn't have been able to grow the business without them.
You wouldn't have been able to run without them, really.
Yeah, 100%. And then we started hiring some casual employees because, again, our meals just kept growing. And this is at a stage where gyms were asking if they could bulk buy our meals so they could sell them at their reception.
Yeah, so we were starting a B2B, a business-to-business side to the meal prep ting. And obviously when you sell wholesale, you need to be selling it at a price where they can also make money on it too. And so you make less money per unit, but often you do things in business not for the immediate profit that's going to be sort of achieved from selling at a wholesale level. You're doing it for the footprint of the brand. You're doing it for exposure. You're doing it to maintain relationships. You're doing it because you know where your customers are. And the more exposure that they can have to your meals, the greater chance that they're going to come to you and, hopefully purchase off the website. And so that was the reason we were in that wholesale section, but we understood what that section of the business meant to us. We didn't delve into the wholesale section in any sort of large way because we understood the size of our business cannot facilitate that additional branch.
And to look back at it, the meal prep business was an online business because we didn't have a shop front. Yes, we still sold in gyms and in the supplement store, but it was a purely online business. When you look at online businesses now, you know that they have a massive marketing budget. But back then, we played around with very, very small budgets. We taught ourselves how to do Facebook ads, campaigns, and also organic marketing strategies. Did you want to touch on a few of the things that we did for the Mighty Macro business?
Yeah, so exactly that. We had strategic organic content, which is just posting on the platforms, posting on the stories, trying to find engaging ways that look different to what your competitors are doing. And then we did have a paid section eventually to that business to drive online sales, which that section was really interesting because, as you said, we were working with small budgets. And when we say small, it's like $80, $120 over a 2-week period. So we're doing $10, $15, $20 a day type thing. So it certainly wasn't large budgets, but we were able to achieve really good results. And then when we saw that with, an increased probability that we're going to get the results that we have been getting, we were more confident in putting money behind those particular paid ads. And that's when we were able to scale it up until, a few $1,000s budget. And that's where we really saw it probably rocket from that 1,600 mark, and surpass 2,000 meals per week. So the paid section was absolutely one of the best drivers for the business, but it had to start with organic content, posting in an engaging way. So we knew what type of content we should be amplifying. And so one of the things that we did, aside from the normal posting, was we decided to do a year's worth of food giveaway. And at the time, we hadn't seen people do giveaways that looked anything like this. It might be, a supplement store giving away a free shaker, but the whole concept of giving large giveaways on social media, we certainly hadn't come across it.
This is in 2016, maybe 15, 16.
Yeah.
I think so, very early.
And so when businesses were advertising, as you said, you're on Canva producing things that look like menus or flyers. People were still advertising like it was a magazine. And so, yeah, businesses were advertising there, but it didn't look like it does today. And so when we decided to do a video, when video first started to come out, because most of the time it was graphics, it was copy. And we decided to do the video for the giveaway and it took off. As a side note, we ended up seeing a whole bunch of people in the fitness industry end up doing giveaways of that sort. And, the effectiveness of it continued to drop because eventually the algorithms picked it up. And if you put free or giveaway or win inside your copy, it would just I guess, decrease the potential reach that like your post was going to have. But that hadn't happened when we first did the year giveaway. And we went from, would you like to mention how many followers it went from?
I'm really bad at remembering numbers, so Steve's probably going to like frown at me if I get this wrong. Did our Facebook page start at 1,000?
No. It was like 450 to 500 followers before we did the giveaway.
Oh, yeah.
And then it went to 5,000 plus, like it was almost overnight, but certainly within the week. And pretty much from that point on, we didn't have like a slow week in the business. Like there was no weeks where we didn't make profit in terms of, surpassing the amount of orders that we needed to break even. That was like a pretty pivotal moment. And we worked out what it was going to cost. Like this is one of the things that you can do when you're a small business and you can be dynamic. The meals were costing us something like $2.50 a meal to make. We said, okay, well, we do 12 packs. We could do 7 meals and that would be 1 meal a day and that would, calculate a year's, worth of food for free. But 12 packs were our minimum size. And so we calculated $2.50 times the 12, add the plastic, add the container, whatever. And we times that by the 52 weeks and it came out to be something like $1,500 odd. There's a few other little expenses. And still, like for a one single post, $1,500 was a decent amount for us to spend, but it was disproportionately effective in getting followers and having people find out about us. So that was probably one of the coolest things that we did because, again, we hadn't seen anyone do any giveaways and it certainly worked well. We quickly incorporated that into the supplement store as well and did a few things there, and that worked because we're in a pretty tight time frame of using that tactic. But yeah, that was one of the things I remember most.
That was definitely one of the most pivotal moments. And because my face was on it, I was now known as the girl in the chef uniform giving away free food.
And because your heritage is from New Zealand and people can identify that, a whole bunch of like new followers came from New Zealand, which certainly didn't help the business, but it ended up going viral that way too. It didn't hit 1 million views, did it? I think it was like closer to half a million maybe, something like that. I don't know. It was in the hundreds of thousands.
Back in 2015, 16, that's huge for organic reach.
Yeah. And
it got to the point where we had messages every single day, like so many messages messaging in, giving us like their whole story
as
on
to
why
we should select them,
why they should get the whole year's worth of meals for free, which obviously puts pressure on us because you feel for someone going through something.
Yeah.
But you don't want to let down everyone else who has genuinely entered and liked your page and, followed along just to give it to someone with like a sad story, as bad as it sounds.
Yeah, and like sometimes it wasn't just like a sad story. It was like, I've got cancer. I've only got X amount of time to live. This would really help me, and like that's impactful. Like you want to help people like that, but for us to go and select you, like because like you've sent a message in like that, it kind of felt like people were trying to take advantage of the fact we were doing a giveaway.
Yeah, it got to the point where we were receiving so many of those that we just stopped replying to those specific messages. Yeah.
I think we even had people wanting to open up franchises off the back of that. Yeah, I remember getting a few messages and they're like, oh, like, would you be open to this or that? So yeah, it's crazy, like the types of opportunities that can come off the back of effective marketing or even non-effective marketing that just reaches a lot of people. Like you just never know like what opportunities are going to come off the back of being in that social media marketing space.
Yeah. So we were sitting around the 2,000 meals to 2,600 meals almost every single week for quite a few months. Things just kept going wrong, but then things were going great. And then they'd go wrong and then things were going great. We'd have to change suppliers. Our food costs increased massively. Meat went up ridiculously. There were some weeks where our ingredients would arrive on time. So we would have to, go down to Coles and buy 50 tins of diced tomatoes and wheel them to the car. And it got to the point where we were doing so well at the marketing for the Mighty Macro business, but Steve could see that we weren't able to facilitate the meals and the growth in the kitchen with the current team and processes.
Yeah, it became, as we said, when we took on some casual employees, it became hard to find people that were going to fit the business and that we could rely on because of the pressure that was associated with that business. Like, say we paid these casual employees fortnightly, you could guarantee in the fortnight they got paid, out of the 4 days they were working that week, they were going to have 2 off. They were going to be sick 2 days of the week because they got paid. And so, yes, of course, we could have done hundreds of interviews and we could have tried a lot of people, and eventually we would have been able to build a team that worked. But for us, inside a small business, with the pressures that we had, it wasn't something that we were willing to sort of experiment with. And so what we ended up doing, because the pressure was significantly high, we decided to increase the cost of the meals, knowing that we would have some of the customer base drop off. I mean, we had already experienced that within the very first few weeks of opening when we increased the cost and had a part of the market fall off. So we knew there were people, because our meals were well priced, that were going to be price sensitive customers and they'd drop off. Now, how you calculate the likely amount of people that are going to drop off, that's anyone's guess, because we were already towards the lower end of pricing in what was sort of standard for the market. And so when we increased the price, I was like, we can't do this, in 50-cent increments. If we're going to do it, it needs to be a good $1, $1.50, $2, straight off the bat, because I don't want to be those people that are consistently just increasing prices slowly. And so we took about $1.50. We went about $1.50 up per meal. And I think we probably had about 30% of people drop off. And that's a real large percent. But what it meant was we did not need the same overheads that were associated with, trying to produce 2,000, 2,200, 2,300 meals. And to be honest, we were actually probably more profitable in the 1,500 meal space, working with less overheads than what we were doing more. And that's a really important thing in business. Just because you're turning over more money, it does not mean that you're making more profit. And matching the business overheads with the volume of business that you are putting out is a really good skill. Otherwise, you can be doing a lot of work and you can be just having a lot of what would have been profits chewed up through overheads because you're not running efficiently. And so we were able to decrease how many delivery drivers, we didn't need the casuals anymore. And so our labor costs dropped. The amount of time that we were spending on the business dropped as well. And so we were probably slightly less profitable, after all things considered, but for the amount of work that we were putting in, it was a much better scenario and it was much more sustainable. And that's where we sort of got some of that, life-work balance back. You weren't consistently stressed every week. And so, the increase in costs certainly decreased the volume of customers that we had, probably more than what we thought it was going to, but we were actually probably more profitable. If we had those same overheads for the business, we would have needed about 10 to 20% more customers working on the overheads that business currently had to really be in an efficient sort of range. When we decreased the overheads that the business had, we became more profitable.
At what point did you think, let's sell this business? Because I'm the type of person that if I'm in a job or I've got a task, I will just keep doing it. And as long as I'm doing it well, then I will stay. I'm a loyal. But Steve saw how much work I was still putting in and seeing all the skills that I had developed from the marketing side of the business, that you wanted me to do it for the supplement stores, because at that time you were opening up another location, which is Enhanced Penrith, correct?
Yeah. And so I think there's two main considerations. But the first one was we knew that we eventually were going to have kids. And I did not see how this business was going to run well if T was taken out of action for a significant portion of the time. And I definitely didn't want her slaving over a kitchen stove whilst being pregnant. That was not a situation that I was going to be okay with, despite how much money the business was making. And so that was one of the things. I'm like, well, I don't want to be making a decision as that comes about. I want to make a decision well before we need to make it, so that we're not making it under pressure. And the second consideration was, we understood that we now had the ability to drive online sales. We could drive a business, even though it was a bricks and mortar business, through social media marketing. And so I was like, that's a way more monetizable skill than cooking food, unless you're going to really push into that space hard, which we decided to decrease the size of the overall business. So that wasn't where we were going. And so I was like, this is a monetizable skill. Not only is that monetizable skill that we could utilize in our own retail stores, and we just worked out we're already well beyond break even in our retail stores by this point. How much extra sales do we need from this point that could probably come from marketing, which would actually give us a significant portion of the profit we were making in the meal prep business? And so once we had done those numbers, it didn't actually seem like a risky decision, especially when you took into account what is the extra income that we're likely going to make from the B2B side of the marketing business? We can now help small businesses in the exact same way that we have. And one of the things that we had moving into that sort of marketing space that some of the bigger digital agencies don't have is we've actually spent our own money on marketing. When we're running a campaign and only, got $120 to spend, we're going to find a creative way to make every single dollar work harder. And so now we're coming into the small business space as business owners, the social media marketing space as a small business, as business owners and people that can do marketing relatively well. And so I think that's really what resonated with a lot of business owners. The fact that we weren't just like, a marketing boy and a marketing girl coming to help their business. It was like, oh no, these guys get it. And so one of the, the things that really helped us, portray that message was when we could identify a business objective, something that we could use in order to drive growth for their business and match that with a marketing campaign, they were like, oh, I get this now. We actually made sense to them. Because if you tell, the business owner, if you do this funny dance, which is like currently a trend, you'll get like a lot of reach. They'll be like, yeah, and how's that supposed to help me sell more cakes? Like it wasn't going to be a sort of a natural thought progression for them. So when we were like, oh, well, actually, if we do this trend, but change it in a slightly different way, not only are we going to get the reach that's been currently associated with this trend, but we'll put this product that you make more margin on that you're currently not moving enough of, and we could potentially really make this a profitable sort of campaign for you. Once you're able to articulate that message in that way to a small business owner in the context that we've also spent our own dollars doing this marketing, that was like a pretty, a pretty strong message that resonated with small business owners.
And we feel for small business owners, especially in like the current climate, it's hard. And when you're spending money to try and market your own business on people who do marketing, they're trusting you with their dollars.
And not even just their dollars. Like I've seen some social media marketers that have put out content and I'm like, that is damaging to the business's reputation. And so I think sometimes that's what they're most afraid of. Like in business, you know that you've wasted a few dollars doing things that haven't really worked out. But if you're going to entrust someone your social media page, which is the message that you're putting out to your customer base, which is what you value most, and you think that there's a good chance that these people are going to screw it up, that's way more scary than losing a few dollars. And so if you're going to go into a digital marketing space, because I know there's a lot of young creators looking to do that, you need to understand the business side of it if you want to really capture a decent portion of the market. If you want to go work inside, the gym space or a beautician space where a lot of it is just, visually pleasing, yeah, that's cool. Like you can probably do that without having much business acumen. But if you want to work across multiple industries, if you want to scale the business up, have, higher level conversations with bigger businesses and be able to charge more, then you need to be matching business acumen with marketing principles and articulating that message to business owners.
And that's exactly what we were doing for ourselves in the Mighty Macro business. Everything that we created, every campaign, every ad, everything that we posted, we made sure it was meaningful, it was impactful, and it had something that the audience would engage with that would shine our business in like a great light.
Yep.
And working with a really small budget. So when we work with now small businesses, we put all of those same emotions into the work that we do because we understand. We've been there before.
Exactly. And so that's made us a great fit for someone like Cassandra at Cassandra's on the Park in St. Mary's. So she's got an amazing business down there. The food's really good. There's a catering side to the business as well as obviously the retail shop front, which does coffee and food. And because we have worked in the food space, not only are we used to advertising food, I think, in an effective manner, but we're able to see some of the nuances that occur inside food-based businesses that are really interesting to the public. And that's really changed our marketing for them just as of late. And so if you head over to their TikTok, the Instagram's got like quite a few views and stuff, but their TikTok is what's moving at the moment. And no, it's not just young people doing dances on TikTok. It's the migration of older people, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s is crazy at the moment. When we get into sort of the marketing algorithms and the things that we've sort of picked up, you'll realize that it's certainly not the space that you might think it is. And so when we've worked with Cassandra and sort of like targeted some of these nuanced areas of the hospitality food side of the business, it's really resonated and people have really engaged with it. And we're achieving hundreds of thousands of views on her page relatively regularly. And a couple of them, is it one or more, have gone into the millions? Just the one?
Just one.
Just the one. I think, what was it, 3.2, 3, 4?
I don't remember numbers.
Well over 3 million views, but there's probably at least 10 posts that have all gone into the hundreds of thousands just of late. And that's because you're mixing business acumen, business insights, you're able to understand the nuances of business and then matching it with business acumen and marketing principles to have something that's engaging. Because there are plenty of cafes out there that have got very pretty pictures of their like products of whatever food or coffee that they're putting out, but they're not getting the type of views that this cafe that we're working with is getting. And you might say, oh, well, how does, advertising something that's not directly about the food impact the business? Can we just tell you, we learned this again from our barbershop. The marketing pieces that help you resonate with the people from that business can be so much more effective than simply putting a product out there that you can find at so many different cafes. Like, you need to have something that's engaging, that helps you resonate with the business owner, the face of the business. Like, that's such a key part for small business owners that want to be owner operators. And that's something that we've been able to really follow through with. So shout out to Cass, you are an amazing business operator, and we're so happy that we can be doing work with you of that sort. But for people listening that want to be like young creators and move in the digital marketing space, like, see if you can learn something from that. It's applying business acumen, marketing principles, and thinking outside the square. You don't need to make cinematographic videos for a cafe. Like, how cool the coffee looks being poured into a cup is not the thing that you need to be focusing on.
We are going to dive into more of our marketing in the next episode. So if you really enjoyed that, then make sure you tune in for the next episodes. But we'll bring it back to the Mighty Macro business. Obviously, we're coming to the end of, I think it was maybe 2019. And we actually had friends reach out and say, hey, can you guys do like marketing? Can you help us with marketing? What are you guys doing with ads? Can you create content? Can you help me with this? Because they've seen the work that we've done for Mighty Macro Meals. Again, like Steve said, with all of our clients at the moment, we find a face of the business. I was a face of the business. And then we also implemented that with the enhanced stores. We made one of the boys the face of the business. Now, it was getting to the end of 2019, and Steve had this brilliant idea that T could do social media marketing and we can sell the Mighty Macro business. Did you want to explain like how you, I guess, prepared the business to pass it over to someone else?
Yeah, so it's actually not how I would prepare a business for sale now. I definitely would have packaged it up in a much better way and made sure that we're putting like runs on the board right before, you have a sale. You want 3 to 6 months of continued growth. Make sure that your processes are tight. Make sure that you've got, documented margins across, every product line that you offer, and so that you can sell the business in a really sort of structured and profitable way. For me, being, having the entrepreneurial DNA that I have, when I sort of make a decision, sometimes it happens faster than anyone else is ready for. And so as soon as I saw that, first of all, I want to out of this business long term, and second of all, I had really identified that what you've essentially got is a monetizable skill that can not only help internally but help the B2B side of things. I was like ready to pull the trigger straight away. And so we sold that business probably for less than what we could have got, but it was because I knew what we were going to pick up on the back end was going to be much greater, and I would rather move with speed. And so, we ended up selling the business to another PT at the time who wanted to branch out and expand sort of the businesses that he was across. And they did a really good job because we sold it right before COVID-19 hit. Now, we didn't know what COVID-19 was going to be. We sold it in 2020, but COVID really didn't affect Australia from memory until about mid-2020, and we sold it in probably February. So it was something that you kind of heard about that was going on in some other part of the world, but we certainly didn't think it was going to be affecting, any of our businesses in Australia. So we didn't certainly offload it in that manner. But it meant that they really had some challenges when they picked up that business, and I definitely feel for them. But I think they were able to hold it on to it for about 2 years, and they went through the lockdowns, and they really did well to navigate through like a tough time. But I think they ended up closing it off the back of it. And we might see it again. We might see it again in the Western Sydney space. But for the moment, yeah, we've got a few things that we need to focus on. And that was essentially how the business sale came about. We used vendor financing as the way we sold it. And so a lot of small businesses get sold this way. And so if you're thinking, yeah, I'd love to buy a business, but there's no way that I've got a few $100,000 just to pay for it up front. Vendor financing is a situation where sometimes you can have a lump sum that you put down, but essentially if T owns Money Micro Meals and I want to buy it, I say to T, hey, I want to buy your business. I'm happy to pay the amount that you're asking for, but I want to pay it in regular installments over a period of time. And what that means is that T gets to sell the business right now. And sometimes there'll be a clause in place to say, well, if I don't pay the regular payments, T then can re-own that business. If you default on payments, she would then own it and doesn't have to pay back everything that I've currently paid her. So, if it's a 2-year time frame that you're buying the business and I've paid all the way up to a year, but I default, you would take the money as well as retain the business. And so there is a greater level of risk on the person that's buying via vendor finance, but it allows them to do that a lot sooner. And essentially, if you can do it well, and if you've got excellent business acumen and you can cause the business that you're taking on to grow quite quickly, the business will pay for itself. So the profits that are coming from that business will be the thing that pays for it. So you don't need to be, putting large amounts of capital out. But vendor financing is absolutely a viable method for people to be moving into the small business space if they want to get into it.
And we exited that business February 2020. But one thing that we wanted to do was our full-time employees who had stayed with us that whole time, they still stayed with the business. At that time, the new owners could, facilitate the amount of work that needed to be done. Because again, at that time we had decreased the amount of customers by increasing the meals. So it was definitely manageable, not crazy working like me.
Exactly.
Doing the work of 2 full-timers. And that's when merchant media marketing started in February of 2020, which we'll dive into in the next episode, correct?
Yes, but I just remembered there's one situation that I think was probably even more memorable than the freezers breaking. It was when the cooler room broke. You got to tell that story. I feel like that's that's like scars.
Okay, so in a commercial kitchen, if you have one, you'll know. You have a cool room, which is where you put all of your meats, it's basically like a huge fridge. So pretty much all of our ingredients were in there. And you always have to check the dial at the start of the shift and the end of the shift. And at the start of the shift, I noticed it wasn't as cool as what it's supposed to be. And I just kept my eye on it because I think it's after a certain temperature, I forget now because it was so long ago, that you need to move all your food out because it's just not keeping it at that temperature it needs to be. And then one of our casual employees went to open the cool room door and she pulled it so hard that it came off the hinges. So now we have this massive fridge that's struggling to keep temperature, now doesn't have a door.
A commercial freezer door, a big one.
Yeah, so now all of the heat is coming in and the temperature is going down and all of our ingredients for the week, we're midweek, so we only have 2 more weeks to get 2,000 meals out.
You've got 2 days.
2 days.
Yeah.
All of the ingredients are probably going to have to be thrown out if this temperature doesn't go down again. And in that moment, this is something that I'm very grateful for this meal prep business.
So, sorry, just to put that into perspective, you would be losing the cost of the meat, the cost of the labor that it took to prepare that meat, because the meat was now in its final stages to ready to be packaged and sold, plus all the other ingredients that existed inside that cooler room, and you would have to refund the meals. So this was thousands of dollars, approaching probably something of the value of $6,000, $7,000, $8,000.
And possibly losing trust of customers who have purchased from us for the first time.
Which, who knows what long-term cost that actually is.
Yes. So I was stressing, but again, the one thing that I'm very grateful of this business is that it taught me to deal with huge amounts of stress. I would say I went through 3 years of my cortisol being super high and drinking almost a gram of caffeine every single day. So I can handle a lot of stress now.
And to put that into perspective, your average sort of energy drinks have 150, 200 milligrams of caffeine. So a gram is 5 energy drinks a day. This was against my recommendation for TT.
Steve didn't know. he wasn't in the kitchen. I had to get work done. Anyways, so my problem solving skills also developed in this business. So I'm looking at this cool room, looking at everything I'm going to lose, and I'm thinking, what can I do? So I just picked up the cool room door, which I reckon weighed like 30 kilos. Like, it's pretty heavy.
Big, yeah.
I jammed it against the opening and I just sat in it in like a wall sit. And I called Steve and I said, you need to get someone to fix the cool room. And that's what I did. I was like, I'm just going to keep this temperature down. I'm just going to lean against this door for as long as I need to until someone can come and fix this cool room, because that's the only option I have. And I think I was there for 2 hours.
Yeah, maybe 2.5 before our friend Liam came. Shout out to Liam. He owns Goatworks now. He was doing the air conditioning thing at the time, and so he was able to help out with the cooler room. He's now in a pretty cool, customized sort of woodwork-based business, which we can get into another time. But he came out, at whatever time of night it was, and helped us put the freezer room door back on. But in the meantime, we couldn't just wait 2.5 hours for the cooler room, to drop its temperature back down into an area where we could save the food. So I'd called family members to drive to the nearest petrol station, wherever they were, and pick up bags of ice, as many as they could personally, drive it to the kitchen and put the bags of ice inside the cooler room to start dropping the temperature down. Now, maybe we spent a couple of $100 on ice just to drop the temperature, but in order to try and save, thousands of dollars worth of food. But that just, it's a good example of when you get presented a problem in business, you need to think outside of the square a lot of the time to try and solve the issue. And if you're in a stressful situation, just getting stressed is not serving you in any sort of way. And I think that's what you're referring to. Like, now we can come into stressful situations and we don't get overwhelmed by it. We just find a solution, or we minimize the downside from the situation that's playing out. And so it was an excellent lesson amongst all the other ones that business gave us, for us to take on. And I think it's actually made us look at sort of business problems and things that, haven't necessarily gone the way that we had hoped, just really fade into insignificance, because it's like, yeah, but are you holding up a freezer room door or a cooler room door for 2.5 hours, scrambling so that your whole week's work can be saved? And so, I remember that situation pretty clearly. I think we've both been able to manage stress a lot better off the back of it.
Yeah. And every single person, that's just one example of one problem that went wrong. But we had, the gas not working, the stove's not working, air conditioners not working, multiple freezers not working. Because we had a decent network with the supplement stores, we had friends that were in those trades that came out and helped us. And, majority of the time they just charge cost. And ever since we started the social media marketing business, anytime that they've asked for help, or anytime that they've said, oh, hey, can you run some ads for us? Can you do a video shoot? I've always done it for free, because I know off the back of all the help that they helped us all those years ago that
free or a really minimal cost.
Yeah.
Or we'd spend more time or put in extra effort, because that's exactly how they treated us. And that's been a huge lesson that we've learned in business. Relationships are so important. You hear everyone say it, but it's how does that practically work out? Well, when you need someone to help with a cooler room door at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, they're, leaving after they've already finished work and happy to come out. He could have easily just said, hey bro, I've already finished up for the day. I need to be home with my missus. I'll come first thing tomorrow. And that would have been a really nice response. But it wasn't that. It was, hey, I'm going to be there as soon as I can. And that's relationships in business and how helpful they can be. And we're still really good friends with those guys today. And they've done some amazing things in their business that I think hopefully we'll be able to share one day too, because they've kind of had a sort of similar trajectory, working from a really small space and, going into a full-on warehouse and servicing some really large businesses now. So that'll be a cool story when we get to that.
So I have a question for you. Would you ever get into a food business again?
I'd love to say no, but I mean, the way that I look at opportunities, sometimes I can't help myself. But it's the last industry that I'd be looking to get back into. It can be very profitable if you can run it well, but you really do need to be operating towards the top of a space, in my opinion, when you're working with food. Like you need just like a disproportionate amount of customers to make those businesses work, in a profitable manner for an extended period of time. And personally, I think the work that's involved with it is not something I'd be wanting to take on. Like put simply, I think there's easier money out there.
Yeah. Even though it all sounds like, doom and gloom throughout this whole episode, I loved that business.
Yeah, well, I mean, like it was stupidly profitable, but it was a cool business because I mean, all of our food expenses got, incorporated into that business as well. In case the OTO is listening, it was all legitimate. But yeah, it was a cool business because we met a lot of people off the back of it. Like business owners are people that buy prep meals because they don't have time to cook for themselves either. And so what that business gave us was awesome. And I think, as I said, it might reappear in the near future, but if it does, it will be just done in a different way. I think we kind of know how we would facilitate a business like that moving forward.
And that is just, I guess, a glimpse of Mighty Macro Meals. There's so many more stories that we could jump into on the day-to-day that happened, but that's kind of like an overview of how we came across the opportunity, grew it, without knowing, being very naive when we first got into it, and then not preparing it for sale, but selling it, and then diving into merchant media marketing.
Yes, which we will cover in the next episode.
Yes. So head over to the next episode. Cut.